Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on something that I think is really relevant to everyone listening, and that's tech accountability and human rights, but specifically in Africa.
Okay.
So we're really moving beyond just thinking about, what's the latest app or, the newest phone. And we're really trying to look at technology as something that can be a powerful tool for good, but also can be a source of potential harm.
Yeah.
Um, and to do that, today we're diving deep into a policy brief from the Lincoln Alexander School of Law. And they really paint a picture of the current digital landscape in Africa. And one of the things that really jumped out at me was that 73% of the population of Africa is still offline.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's a massive number. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just about, missing out on the latest trends or, whatever's happening on social media that has real consequences for people's lives.
Hmm.
We're talking about education, healthcare, economic opportunity.
Yeah.
It really kind of gets to the heart of like basic human rights in the digital age.
Absolutely. And, it's not just theoretical either when you think about something like the NSARS protests that happened in Nigeria.
Right.
Technology played a huge role in organizing and amplifying that movement.
Right.
But it was also used by the government for surveillance and suppression.
Exactly. I mean, that's a perfect example right there of how technology is such a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be this incredible tool for empowering citizens and promoting democracy,
Right.
but in the same breath, it
Mhm.
can be used to control and silence dissent.
It's really scary.
Yeah.
So how do we navigate that? How do we figure out, how to make sure that technology is being used responsibly and ethically?
One of the things that I think is really important to look at is the increasing number of partnerships that are happening between governments and tech companies.
Okay.
Now, on the one hand, these partnerships can be really great. They can be a way to improve public services.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are some serious concerns about transparency and accountability.
Yeah, it's like this, tightrope walk, right? Where there's so much potential for, amazing things to happen.
Right.
But there's also this risk of, things going really wrong.
Exactly.
And the policy brief actually uses this example of Rwanda's partnership with Zipline.
Okay.
And they're using drones to deliver medical supplies to these really remote areas.
Wow.
And it's been incredibly successful.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a really cool example of how technology can be used to address a critical need.
Yeah.
But then you have a case like Benin's partnership with Estonia,
Okay.
where they're developing this e-government framework.
Okay.
And while, the goal of improving efficiency is great, the way they're doing it is lacking transparency.
Yeah.
And it's raising some red flags about data privacy and who's really in control in the long term.
It really highlights the importance of asking those hard questions from the beginning. Who controls the data? Who's benefiting from this? What are the risks?
Yeah.
And I think, probably most importantly, how do we make sure that people, everyday citizens actually have a voice in these decisions?
Absolutely. And it's not just about governments and tech companies.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to talk about the role of civil society organizations,
Yeah.
those groups that are supposed to be holding everyone accountable.
Right, the watchdogs.
Yeah, exactly, the watchdogs.
Yeah. The brief actually points out that a lot of these organizations, these CSOs, are facing huge obstacles in advocating for the public good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these groups are often underfunded.
Yeah.
They lack access to decision-making processes,
Right.
and they can face, legal and political barriers.
It's David and Goliath.
It is. It totally is.
And speaking of these power imbalances,
Yeah.
the policy brief talks about this idea of the hidden cost of a digital ecosystem.
Okay.
And, it's easy to get excited about free internet and, all the great things about social media.
Yeah.
But what are we really giving up for that?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, are we sacrificing our privacy, our freedom of expression, even our right to access information?
It's really scary.
Yeah, and the brief points out some really concerning issues, things like censorship, internet shutdowns, surveillance, and even the exploitation of content moderators.
Yeah, these are dark topics, but I think it's important that we talk about them.
Absolutely.
The brief mentions these internet shutdowns that happen in Ethiopia and Uganda during elections.
Right.
And those are really chilling examples of how technology can be used to just straight up control the flow of information and silence any dissent.
Yeah, and then you have the issue of content moderators.
Right.
These are the people who have to sift through all the really disturbing content on the platforms that we use every day.
Mm-hmm.
The violence, the hate speech,
Sure.
the child exploitation.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
It is. It's heavy stuff, and they're providing such an important service, but often at a huge personal cost.
It really makes you think about the human cost of all of this. Behind every algorithm and every platform, there are real people whose lives are being impacted.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, as users of these platforms, are we complicit in these systems when we choose to, look away from the hidden costs?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And the thing is, these issues aren't confined to Africa. These are global challenges that require global solutions. I mean, think about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the debates about algorithmic bias, the concerns about the spread of misinformation.
Yeah.
I mean, these are challenges that we all face in this digital world.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know what, though? I think it's important for us to remember that while the problems are big, the opportunities are also huge.
Oh, absolutely.
And especially in Africa, where we see this just, wave of innovation and this real desire to use technology to do good in the world, to make things better.
Yeah, there's a real energy there.
Yeah.
A real kind of spirit of creativity and resilience, I think, that's really driving progress when it comes to technology in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in the beginning, we talked about how 73% of Africa is still offline, and that's obviously, a huge hurdle.
Right.
So what's being done to try to bridge that digital divide and bring more people online?
Well, there's a couple of things that are happening, and some of it is focused on building the actual physical infrastructure. So laying those fiber optic cables and expanding mobile network coverage.
Right. So like getting the backbone in place.
Exactly. Yeah, the backbone and making sure that even those in remote areas can access it.
Yeah, but then there's also the cost, of actually getting online, which can be a barrier for a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where affordability comes in. There are organizations and governments that are working to bring down the cost of data
Okay.
and the cost of devices. So it's actually, realistic for people to get connected.
It's like building a bridge, right? You need both sides to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
You need the infrastructure there, but it also has to be affordable.
Exactly.
But even then, just having access, isn't enough, right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not just about getting people connected. It's about making sure they know how to use the technology.
Right.
Give them the skills and the knowledge to actually use it effectively.
So it's like digital literacy is key.
It's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
You have to understand the basics before you can really communicate.
So are there programs, to teach people these essential digital skills?
Oh, tons all over the continent,
Mm.
and they range from basic computer literacy to online safety to even how to use social media for business or, for activism.
Wow, that's great. So, we're building this infrastructure, we're making it affordable, and we're teaching people how to use it. What are some of the areas where you see African innovators really kind of shining and really using technology to solve local problems?
Well, one that really jumps out is mobile banking and financial inclusion.
Okay.
In many parts of Africa, traditional banks are just out of reach for so many people.
Right.
But mobile phones, they're everywhere.
Right. So using the technology that people already have.
Exactly. And African entrepreneurs have created these mobile money platforms that allow people to send and receive money, pay bills, even access loans and insurance, all through their phones.
Wow.
I mean, it's completely changing the way people manage their finances.
It's almost like they've leapfrogged over the limitations of traditional banking and created something entirely new.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Are there other areas where we're seeing that kind of leapfrogging happening?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh.
I mean, healthcare is another great example. Telehealth platforms are connecting patients in remote areas with doctors in cities.
Wow.
So they're overcoming those geographic barriers that we talked about.
That's huge, especially when you think about, the limited access to healthcare that a lot of people in those areas face.
Absolutely. And then there's education.
Yeah.
Online learning platforms are providing access to quality education for students who might not be able to go to a traditional school.
So much potential.
So much potential.
What about agriculture? I feel like that's got to be a huge area where technology can make a big difference, especially in a continent where agriculture is such a vital part of the economy.
You're right on. There are companies using AI and data analysis to help farmers improve their yields,
Okay.
manage their resources better, and connect with markets.
So making agriculture more efficient.
More efficient and sustainable.
That's amazing. It's really inspiring to hear about all this innovation. But, I know it can't always be easy for African entrepreneurs and innovators.
Right.
What are some of the challenges that they face?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is funding.
Okay.
African startups often struggle to get the investment they need to grow their businesses.
So it's not just about having the ideas, it's about having the resources to actually make those ideas happen.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of infrastructure.
Yeah. Right, because we talked about, expanding internet access.
Yeah.
But you also need things like reliable electricity
Right.
and transportation networks.
Absolutely. All of that is critical.
It's like building a house. You need a good foundation.
Yeah. You need a good foundation before you can add all the bells and whistles.
So what needs to happen at the policy level to kind of create that environment where innovation can really flourish?
Well, governments have a huge role to play.
Yeah.
They can create incentives for investment in startups. They can streamline regulations to make it easier for businesses to operate. And they can invest in education and skills development.
Right.
So you're creating this pipeline of tech talent.
So it's about supporting both the supply side and the demand side, right?
Exactly. You've got to have both.
The innovators and the people who are actually going to be using the technology.
Yeah, and it's about finding that balance, between encouraging innovation and protecting human rights. We can't sacrifice one for the other.
Right. It all comes back to that idea of tech accountability.
It does.
So how do we make sure that as technology continues to advance and advances in a way that benefits everyone and doesn't leave people behind?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I don't think there's a simple answer.
Yeah.
It's about having these conversations,
Yeah.
Bringing diverse voices to the table and making sure that we're thinking about human rights at every stage of the process.
So being intentional about it.
Intentional and thoughtful,
Yeah.
Not just letting technology lead the way, but actually shaping it to align with our values.
Right.
And that takes all of us,
Wow.
governments, tech companies, civil society, individuals, we all have a role to play.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into, tech and human rights in Africa,
Yeah.
I'm feeling, I think a sense of cautious optimism.
Okay.
We've talked about some big challenges, but I also see this just incredible, wave of innovation and people using technology to tackle some really tough problems and make lives better.
Yeah. I think there's a real shift happening.
Yeah.
Like a movement towards using technology, not just to, make money, but to actually, do good in the world.
Right, right.
And I think it's really exciting to see, Africa really leading the way in so many of these areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And in part two, we kind of touched on some of those exciting things happening in, sectors like finance and healthcare and agriculture.
Right.
So I'd love to kind of dig into those a bit deeper. What are some specific examples that you can think of that really illustrate this approach to, ethical and inclusive technology?
Well, we talked about Zipline earlier, the company that's using drones to deliver medical supplies in Rwanda and Ghana.
Right.
And, it's more than just delivering medicine.
Yeah.
They're delivering hope.
Right.
They're delivering this future where your location, doesn't determine whether or not you can access healthcare.
Right. It's literally bridging that gap, between those who have and those who don't.
Exactly.
What about in the education sector?
Oh, there's some amazing initiatives there, too. Organizations like Ineza Education. You're using mobile technology to bring, high-quality education to kids in these remote areas,
Yeah.
Kids who might not have a school to go to.
It's like putting a whole library in their pocket.
Yeah, it's incredible.
What about, using AI to tackle things like food security?
Oh, there's so much potential there.
Yeah.
Companies are developing these AI-powered tools that can help farmers analyze their soil,
Wow.
predict weather patterns, and, really optimize how they're using water and fertilizer.
It's like giving them a superpower,
It kind of is.
helping them to make better decisions and produce more food with fewer resources.
Exactly. And it's not just about, producing more food. It's about making agriculture more sustainable, more resilient to climate change,
Mm.
Making sure that people in the future have enough to eat.
Right, right. It's incredible to see, how technology can be this force for good and really drive positive change.
Yeah.
But we can't be naive, right? I mean, there are downsides to all of this.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Potential risks, that we need to be aware of.
Technology is a tool,
Right,
and any tool can be used for good or for bad.
right.
It all depends on the intentions of the people who are creating it and the people who are using it.
So how do we make sure that these really powerful technologies are being used responsibly, ethically, that they don't end up actually reinforcing, inequalities or creating new ones?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it takes a multi-pronged approach. It starts with education. We're
Okay.
fostering digital literacy.
Right.
We need to teach people how to use technology critically,
Right.
to be aware of potential biases,
That
in algorithms,
right.
to understand how their data is being used.
So empowering people to really be informed and discerning users of technology.
Exactly. Not just passive consumers.
Right.
But, it's also about having strong regulations.
Yeah.
Policies that protect people's privacy, that promote competition, that prevent, technology being used for surveillance or censorship.
Right. So kind of creating this framework where innovation can thrive, but within these ethical boundaries.
Exactly.
What about the tech companies themselves?
Yeah.
What role do they play? What responsibility do they have?
Oh, they have a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones building these powerful technologies,
Yeah.
and they need to be held accountable for how those technologies impact society.
Right.
They need to be thinking about ethical considerations when they're developing products. They need to be transparent about how their algorithms work,
Right.
and they need to be really proactive in trying to mitigate any potential harms.
So it's not just about, writing code. It's about writing code with a conscience.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great way to put it.
It's about designing technology with human rights in mind, with a
Actually,
focus on inclusivity and social justice.
I think it's also about having those tough conversations,
Yeah. Yeah.
acknowledging that there are trade-offs, there are risks,
Right.
and being willing to change course,
Yeah.
when things aren't working.
Right. Being adaptable.
Adaptable, exactly. It's an ongoing process, a continuous dialogue, and it really takes all of us, governments, tech companies, civil society, individuals, all working together to create a future where technology really benefits everyone.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up today, I want to leave our listeners with a sense of hope and a sense of, agency.
Yeah.
We've explored some really complex issues, but I think what's clear is that we have the power to shape the future of technology.
Absolutely.
We can choose to be informed and engaged citizens.
Right.
We can demand better from the people in power, and we can use our own voices and actions to create, a more just and equitable digital world.
Well said. And I think, it's not just about what we do, it's about how we think about technology.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond this idea that technology is either good or bad. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used in lots of different ways. And it's really up to us to decide what kind of future we want to build.
Yeah, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. We hope this conversation has sparked some curiosity, maybe challenged some assumptions, and really empowered you to think critically about, the role of technology in your life and in the world.
Great to be here.
Keep asking those questions, keep
Yeah.
learning and keep pushing for a better future.